Who doesn't love a retro bike? And if you remember recently, we rode Kawasaki Z900RS, and that's like a cool, modern, retro-styled bike. And I loved it. Today it's time to throw back to the bike that kind of led to that. It's a retro version of a retro bike, but it's still a retro. It's all a bit messy now. This is a Kawasaki ZRX1200R, and I bloody love them. These used pieces are brought to you by Datatag. Datatag support us to do tests on used bikes, classic bikes, and stuff that you wouldn't otherwise get to see. So from Datatag, if you buy a used bike with Datatag on it, you can go onto their website and re-register the Datatag to your name. And that means you get all the benefits of the Datatag system. It's not very much, it's less than 20 quid. And you can get on there and get the bike registered to you, so if it does get nicked, all the parts will find their way back to you. If you don't do that, they'll just phone the last owner who will say, not my bike, not my problem. So really good way to keep your Datatag security systems up to date. So this ZRX1200R. Yes, I know we have a penchant for doing things with bikes in the wrong colour. We upset the internet with our Harley Davidson and Yamaha Speedbot colours, and now we're going to ride a silver Kawasaki when it really should be green. That said, the heart says green, but silver ones, I've even seen a sort of burgundy red one at M&P. They've got 3 or 4 of them at the moment. They look good in all colours. It's one of those bikes with kind of a properly classic, kind of timeless style that is as nice to ride as it is to look at. So what is it? Well, early 2000s, the 70s retro vibe at Kawasaki was strong, so they built a bike that was a replica of the Eddie Lawson bikes from the late 70s and early 80s. This was based on the ZZR1100 motor, and it was kind of a big, fat, simple bike that looked cool and was fun to ride. I had a load of time playing on them when I was a teenager. My dad had a few of them. They were a bit of a dad's bike, to be honest, but genuinely brilliant thing to ride. It was reasonably fast, smooth, comfortable, great for touring, and handled traditionally, I think is a nice way of putting it. They actually got the handling package on them pretty right. It is heavy enough and solid enough to feel like an old bike, but without being so far that way that they're awful to ride. It's kind of a little, enough of classic to feel classic, but enough of modern to not be shit, if that makes sense. Now, this one is from M&P Swansea. Like I said, they've got 3 or 4 of them for sale. It's got 30,000 miles on them. I've seen them with 40, 50. They're one of those bikes that just seems to go on forever. They don't like corrosion very much, so you've got to keep them looked after in the winter. But the engine's a lovely, solid, reliable old unit. Today, I'm going to see if it's as much fun as I remember. Oh, flowy mountain road. Lovely classic Kawasaki ZRX. Paradise. So what to look out for when buying a used ZRX 1200R? Don't buy one that my dad lent to me. That'd be my first bit of advice. But seriously, obviously all the normal used bike checks apply, but specific to these are a couple of details. Now, one, they're not great at corrosion, so look for corroded fasteners, look for winter use and use that as a haggling point. Brakes were always a weak point on these bikes. Spec-wise, it's a 6-piston Tokiko caliper. It looks amazing. They weren't that good when they were new, and as the years have gone by, you'll find the levers have gone squishy and come back to the bars. You want to see the calipers in good, clean condition, but in all honesty, if I was buying one of these, I'd be looking for a set of 4-pot Tokiko calipers from a GSXR 600 of the era, chucking these in the bin and putting them on. And that will transform the braking and make a bike that actually stops. Elsewhere on them, the early 1200s did suffer from a camshaft problem, but in all fairness, if that's not rattling really loudly when you pick the bike up, it's not going to start doing it now. It was something that affected very low mileage bikes and was a sort of warranty issue early on. Weird little niche things. On the bottom of the carburetors, remember them? There is a little coolant filter. You can see it there, it's a little clear white plastic thing. You need to make sure that's not clogged up, because if it's clogged up, it stops the coolant heating the carburetors, which then on a cold day means you might suffer from carb icing. Finally, at the back of the bike, they've got an eccentric adjuster for the rear chain tensioner rather than the normal 2 lock nut and bolts. That needs to be kept well lubricated. If that gets seized in place and you can't adjust your chain, it's a massive pain. A little sneaky trick as well, you can flip that eccentric adjuster over to put the axle at the bottom, which lifts the rear of the bike up, sharpens the steering up. It's actually quite a nice, simple little handling mod you can do to them. These nose cones are quite easily damaged in a crash, so look for cracks, look for splits and repairs. They're quite expensive to replace and a little bit rare. Oh, look at that view! Wow. Well, good news is I'm not going mad. I haven't remembered these as brilliant and then they turned out to be rubbish. This thing is every bit as much fun now as it was when I last rode one 15 years ago. The ZRX is a giant, playful lump of a motorcycle. It rides exactly like it looks. It's big, it's not super sharp steering, you got to muscle it around, but in a good way. It's really engaging, it's really fun, and there's something I'd actually forgotten. When you ride it on sort of little bumpy, rough B roads like this one, it's got a little sort of bounce and wobble it does. I can't really, you could see it in the video, it sort of hops and bounces around. It's not great in handling terms, but it makes it really fun to ride. Every little crest, it does a little wheel spin and a hop off the top of. Every jump, every dip has got a little wiggle or a lift to the front wheel. It's just really, really enjoyable. And I mean, yeah, if you're trying to keep up with sports bikes on it, not a hope, not a hope. You're going straight through the next hedge. But if you're just out for the joy of a ride, there's something great about it. And there's something that's, yeah, really satisfying, getting the most out of that bike. The brakes, while they're not as bad as I remember, probably because my last one I rode was my dad's and I'd been off-road on it, so the brakes were dire, the brakes aren't great. They're adequate on this, they're in good condition, there's a good lever feel there, they do slow it down, but yeah, especially if you're used to more modern machinery, it takes a little bit of stopping. The engine though, it's got such a meaty, I'm sure that was in every road test of these when they came out, a meaty mid-range. You're just sort of rolling along, 4,000, 5,000 RPM, out of each corner, off of each crest. Just a really nice engine. It does go pretty well when you scream it as well. It does actually pull hard right up to the top, but I find it more satisfying just in a higher gear, just bombing down the road, chucking it around with the handlebars, and trying to get it to wheelie off of every bump and crest I can find. There's a couple of things I'd forgotten from a negative point of view. First and foremost is the gearbox is a little bit clunky. It's not awful, but I had in my head that it had a really slick gearbox, but 15 years have obviously warped that impression. It's not the smoothest gearbox on them. And on a slow, bumpy corner, you know, because of the size of it, it's nigh on 250 kilos. You know, the front tyres sort of hopping all over the place. You're not quite sure what's going on. So in terms of riding a bumpy road fast, you're not going to get massive lean angles on it. On a smooth corner, you can lean it right in. She goes in nicely, but yeah, you're always watching for bumps. You're always riding like you used to have to, where you have to plan for the road and know where the bumps are, or you're going through the hedge. I always find bikes like this a bit weird because you should be finishing a road test on them going, well, that was a load of old rubbish. It's 120 horsepower. Slow, doesn't handle, but they don't handle in the right way, if that makes any sense. You can have bikes that don't handle and just give you no confidence and you get off and feeling like you can't ride a bike. And then you can have bikes that don't handle particularly well, but do it in a way that puts a smile on your face and you can enjoy wrestling with them and throwing them about a bit. This falls definitely into that category. Add that to the fact that it's got plenty of power for cruising down the motorway. It's great to up, it's a great fun touring bike, and actually, for £5 there's a lot of classic bike there for your money. It's not really going to depreciate unless the world turns upside down on its head. So you buy a £5 bike, and rather than parking it in your garage and taking it out only on Sunday, you can go on holiday on it. You can ride it every day of the week. Wouldn't ride it through winter, but apart from that, it's a really usable bike. So the reason we're doing these used bike pieces is because we understand that not all of us can rush out and buy a brand new bike. You know, whether times are getting to get harder or not. Right now, not everyone can afford to go and drop 10, 12, 14, 15 grand on a new bike. I sure as hell can't. So riding bikes like this gives you a bit of a range of flavours. Z900RS, amazing bike. If you don't want to spend that much money, buy one of these. It's the same thing but older and not quite as high tech. If you ask me, I actually think it looks better. Would I buy one in silver? Maybe. I'd probably secretly want a green one, but the burgundy one does look pretty good. ZRX1200, as good as I remember. I'm not going to take this one off-roading like I did my dad's. I'm going to behave myself. M&P would probably never speak to me again if I did, but well worth a look, and yeah, properly good fun old bike.